Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Jack Parrock. Today we're asking the question about whether Europe's workforce is future-proofed. We're going to be discussing how we improve skills and what needs to be done across the bloc to make sure that happens. This year, 2023, was designated as the EU Year of Skills by the European Commission, following pressures from members of the European Parliament to address skills mismatches and labour shortages, mainly in the green and the digital sectors in the European Union. Those are the crucial transition sectors at the moment. But what are the skills that we need in the EU's labour market, and who should get those skills, and indeed where? Workforces in the EU remain predominantly national, and the industrial needs in every country are different. So how should the EU institutions go about this plan, and can we hope to get out? What can we hope to get out of this European Year of Skills? Here in the European Parliament studio with me are three people who are going to be able to help me get some answers to some of those questions. Firstly, we have EPP MEP Dennis Radtke, who is the spokesperson for Employment and Social Affairs for the group. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
Really, really glad and interested to hear what you're going to say. We have Lidia Pereira, who's an EPP Group MEP and also a president of the youth wing of the EPP, the YEP.
Thanks for being here as well.
It's really awesome that you're here. And we have Eoin Drea, who's a senior researcher in the Martens Centre for EU Studies, who's something of an expert in this area as well.
Well, it's good to be here. I'll see what I can bring.
We'll find out.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's start with you, Dennis. This is this big idea of the Year of Skills here in Brussels. We hear about these kind of projects and these ideas from the Commission about these years. But what, in concrete terms, can a year like this, a plan and a project like this, do to improve skills? And what skills do we need in the European Union?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe let me start with one general remark. I'm very thankful to President Ursula von der Leyen that she came up with the idea to have this European Years of Skills, because when we look at the current situation all over Europe, we are really, the question of labor shortages, every member state is touched by this. And we are touched by this on the one hand when we are talking about skilled stuff, and even the workforce without special knowledges, without special skills. In my country, in Germany, we are completely running out of staff. So this is really a big issue. And the European Commission has ambitious goals, ambitious targets for 2030. So we are talking about 60% of adults in training and every year, and at least 78% in employment. These are the targets for 2030 from the European Commission. Was announced in the Porto Social Summit 2 years ago, and I think this European Years of Skills can really be a platform to make these things going. And of course, as always, we have this discussion: is this really a European issue? Isn't this just a member state's competence, a member state's issues? Yes, of course, and no one wants to grab member states' competences in this. But I think the EU can really help ensure that every member state and every worker that is affected can get access to this training, what is needed. And maybe let me give one example or one thought what I really think we can use this European Years of Skills for. A few months ago, I was in contact with a distance university in Germany, in the city of Hagen. It's quite famous. I think it's Europe's biggest distance university. And of course, due to this, let me call it business model or learning model, they have a special knowledge. And I discussed with them, and I want to discuss it with all the distance universities in this European Years of Skills. How can we use these special knowledges, for instance, for training on the job when we are talking about refugees from from Ukraine coming to the EU. They are starting to work. So maybe how can we ensure that the distance universities can deliver their special knowledge on distance learning, that they have some training on the job, maybe training in the language. Yeah. So we have the one side already working, and on the other side maybe learning. So I think we have to come up with new ideas. And as a coordinator in Ample committee, I like to say, of course, the question of with view on refugees, on people coming from abroad, coming from third countries, the question of work is a key question for integration. So where I'm coming from, my constituency, the rural area, 150 years ago, it was an amount of small villages. Yeah. And with the beginning of the industrialization, with coal mining, with steel plants, we needed people from everywhere. So we are a melting pot. And the work in the steel plants, in the coal mines, that was key for the integration. So I think that there's really a very important connection.
It's really key. And what you mentioned there, actually, to touch on that, you mentioned this idea of member states versus the European Union. Mm-hmm. And one of the stats that sort of stands out to me, for instance, the member states want initiatives for the green transition, for the digital transition. One of them, for instance, is the Battery Alliance, to try and make sure that Europe is competitive on batteries. And the Commission's own numbers estimate that there needs 800,000 workers to be trained, upskilled or reskilled by 2025. That's 2 years away. Yeah. 800,000.
That's tomorrow. Let's be honest. It's tomorrow.
It's nearly 1 million people. Do you think, Lidia, that there is enough urgency and enough understanding of how we're going to do this?
I think there is enough urgency. I don't think, or I'm not so sure about the understanding of that, because I have, it's not a negative perspective over the next years. It's quite the opposite, but I do think that the speed that we are witnessing in innovation, in artificial intelligence, in digitalization is far too fast, or it's much more faster than what we are used to see in the past history. If we look at the Industrial Revolution, if we look at the time or the period with which Twitter was online, 29 days. If we look back, Industrial Revolution, Twitter online in 29 days, what comes next? And I think we are witnessing exactly this very fast moving society, innovation, to which we are probably not 100% ready to respond. So I think there's numerous opportunities. Obviously, it requires a lot of commitment from the governments to actually acknowledge this and then put in place the necessary actions. And obviously, the European Commission sees from a global competitive position that this is crucial to affirm the geopolitical position of the European Union in the future on these matters. But I do believe that we are still a little bit lagging behind, or not a little bit, we are lagging behind compared to other powers in the world. And I'm referring specifically to China and the United States, but also to India. And so we have to be very careful to that, because otherwise we will keep being lagging behind, and that's not what we want. But I think people need to understand that this volatile and somehow uncertain scenario, as I said, there is a window of opportunity. We just need to be, consequent with that in delivering in policies to achieve this competitiveness status that the EU should prevail or should fight for. But to which, if we look at the map of Europe, we see huge discrepancies on skills, competences between countries. If we compare Portugal to Sweden, or if we compare France to Finland, it is immense. So. The urgency of the European Commission to deliver on this is exactly to try to have some baseline, but obviously the discrepancies are so deep that we still have a long path. But obviously, the time, the clock is ticking, and we need to take action. And education will be crucial on this.
Or has the bomb already gone off? That's the question.
Well, probably. And we see so many thinkers reflecting on, the other side of this revolution that is ongoing, on the artificial intelligence, the ethical side of that. So I think we really need to focus much more. Obviously, there's many other challenges. For example, fighting climate change, the green transition, digital transition. But if we look at the employment side, we are probably lagging behind.
Yeah, and it's got to move. I'm going to come to you, Eoin, because essentially what we're talking about here is that this year of skills idea. The EU's like, right, we're going to do this. We're going to make sure people have got skills. But this comes down to individual people in member states. This comes down to somebody who works in a factory in Romania now going to work on a solar plant somewhere and changing their jobs. How quickly can this happen, and what does it require? Money, time?
Yes, well, it requires both plus a lot more, because we're talking about much broader societal and technological shifts here. So when we talk about green and tech, we're only talking about, one specific part of the equation. But I was very glad that Lidia mentioned education, because really you have to take a short-term perspective and you have to take a long-term perspective. And the short-term perspective is you're going to try and do your best to kind of plug the holes in the immediate future. And something like that, education and retraining schemes are essential, not just for younger people, who might have slipped out of education or training in their late teens or early 20s, but also like the people you mentioned who want to retrain and get into a new industry. But I think we have to be very careful, because I think it's a lot more nuanced sometimes than people think. We can look at the experience of, areas like the south of Belgium, northern France, some of the states in the United States like Virginia, West Virginia, where people said that, tourism and, the Amazon economy was going to replace, well-paid unionised, factory jobs. And of course, there's a huge discrepancy in earnings. So it doesn't, actually equate if you're, a married person in your 40s or 50s with a couple of kids. So we have to acknowledge that fact. Now, in the longer term, it's about meeting head-on these societal challenges, and that is essentially where I think education is key for the next generations. And we can go all the way back. It's not often talked about in terms of skills or reskilling, but we can go all the way back to childcare, pre-nursery care. It's the one area where the academic research is very, very clear that can have hugely positive impacts, particularly for kids coming from, say, lower income families. It can break the cycle of multi-generational kind of unemployment, and it leads to more positive outcomes in everything from poverty, employment, well-being, everything like that. One other point I would like to make, Jack, if we have the time, is that, and again, this isn't often talked about in reskilling, is that for the younger generations in particular, when we talk about reskilling, there almost needs to be kind of a de-stress pillar to reskilling, because as Lidia mentioned,
this is going to be good for you and it's not stressful.
Yes, and it's often the stresses and the anxieties are often exacerbated by technology, by social media. Now, there's a lot of super great things about technology, but we have to be aware kind of maybe of the side effects of that in terms of anxiety, depression, self-harm, teenagers spending more time than ever on their own, which seems bizarre to me, given my teenage experience.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing, a huge shift in workforce and life. Everything changes if that happens.
May I come in on that?
Please,
because this is a very important point, and we really have to take this serious. So the one thing is, of course, yes, we need the upskilling, especially on the digital skills. We are talking about 4 out of 10 people without a lack of digital skills. That is a problem. With the development of the labor market and the changing in the setup of the work, no doubt about that. But on the other hand, I'm very proud that we as EPP are the driving force here in this parliament when we talk about mental health issues. So we have our great colleague Maria Walsh, who was pushing very hard for this issue, and there isn't everything solved, but we are the driving force as EPP for this issue, and this is really critical because I can remember 20 years ago when you had some mental illness, the people were laughing. So, you have to be strong and so on. And thank God that the times have changed and that we are taking this thing serious. And for instance, when you look in Germany, we are talking about the hardworking people that cannot work anymore. But to be honest, the people that are the biggest amount of people who are not capable to work anymore is because of mental illness. This is the biggest group in Germany. So
breakdowns and burnouts.
The whole package.
So this is a big issue, though, Dennis. So when we talk though about industries, and you're talking about Germany there. When we talk about the transitions, Germany has a huge car industry, important for digital and for the green transition. How can we make sure that those countries, the smaller EU member states, when we talk about the reskilling, that it isn't just Germany, which has a big auto industry, it isn't just France, which already has a big energy industry that succeeds, or, the Nordic countries who are pretty solid, that every country gets reskilled, and that it's not just the lowest paying factory jobs are going to the poorer countries, Bulgaria, Romania, etc.
So that is why I said in my first statement, in my eyes, it is really necessary that we are doing this EU initiative to ensure that all member states, that is guaranteed that all countries, big or small money, will and can benefit from it. This is crucial. So it's not about grabbing member states' competence. It's giving in a question of assistance and ensuring in this particular issue.
Do you think that the Year of Skills and the plan is already taking into consideration that, Lidia? Do you think that we're moving in that way? Because member states just don't have those ideas oftentimes. They protect their own workforces. And they have massive fights with their own workforces when you look at the French and the protests on the street, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think this is a much deeper reflection, but I think it is good that we have the chance to talk about it. My experience here in the Parliament, but also as President of the Youth of EPP, I have expressed my concern on the impact of the pandemic in the nationalization of certain matters. And I think we became, because we were, working from home and a bit more detached from one another than ever before. I think at the policy level or even at political level, member states, they focused on delivering for their citizens. The people were looking at the government and asking, we need help, how do we fight COVID-19 and so on. So, and after the pandemic, we have the war in Ukraine, right? So there is, a number of topics that are kind of in priority if we want to look at the bigger picture. And I think actually the European Commission has been very keen on that in providing the guidance and even in the geopolitical talks with the United States and so on. So this being said, the priorities or the national priorities so far have been putting aside the topic that we are, in my view, the topic that we are discussing today. And obviously, I believe that marking the year of 2023 as the European Year of Skills can actually raise awareness. It's not sufficient. There's a lot of work to do, obviously, we know that. But it's a good step to raise awareness on the importance of this topic in the future of Europe, in the lenses of the future of Europe, but also in the lenses of the future of the member states, because there is no future of Europe if we don't have the member states on board on this. So I think this obviously, our circumstances or our context is different, for example, from the one of China or the US, right? Because there is a war at the gates of Europe. But at the same time, I feel optimistic because in the several talks with Ukraine, actually skills, digitalization have been somehow a priority as well in the next steps for the accession of Ukraine to the European Union. So I think the European Union acknowledges this as the skills as an important topic, but for different reasons, the member states have been a bit more focused on, more domestic policies. But obviously, we are here to also work together with the Commission, with the Council, in providing the guidance that we think it is necessary to, and I want to insist on this, to keep the European Union as competitive as possible in a very competitive world that we are shifting to.
Yeah, this is it, Eoin. So industry is the one that really policy aside, it's the industry that makes us competitive. So nice EU-wide agreements where there's funding and support, that's all well and good. But it's the industry that needs to step up and compete. And they are crying out for staff, aren't they? They're looking for these people and they just can't find them and they have to pull them in from outside.
Yes, well, it's not just a question of shortage of people. It's the shortage of people with the right skills, because there are still specific sectors, which would say are oversupplied with workers. You only have to look at the EU bubble here in Brussels to see how many job applications roll in for every vacancy. Or there's recent data from the UK to say that for job applications with a very specific set of criteria, say for example a second-class honours university degree, that the average number of applications is between 40 and 50. But in saying that, 9 out of 10 jobs where there is the most serious undersupply in Europe at the moment are all in the construction industry. So, and the final one in the top 10 is nursing. And it's probably a good representative of two of the key areas, construction and the care industry.
And not to speak about the demographic challenges that we have, especially in Europe, which is we often say a demographic winter, because we are going to face more pressure on
from the aging population.
Yes. The aging population.
This is it. You can't retrain a 55-year-old woman to get. Well, maybe you can, but it's unlikely she's going to get into a construction role.
Well, you see, this is the thing. This is why I think we have to, we really need to let go of some of the old certainties and take kind of a more innovative approach, because the data at the moment would suggest that over the age of 50, even if you have a good level of education, if you're in a declining industry, it will be very hard, as you say, to get not because you can't learn the skills, but because there is this generation
stigma against you. You've done your career.
But to be honest, we really have to change it. So it's not just a political thing, and it's not just a thing that is an individual thing. It is also, we need a change of mind in the business. So it was in the last few years, no, he's 59, why should we hire him? Oh, well, he is 55, why paying for training for him? He's so close to retirement, this investment makes no sense. So we really need a change in mind.
Yeah.
Where does that come from, though? Right? It's really true. Like, if you go into, I've been to China and seen the factories, and there are people of all ages, and you see them. They are churning. Their industry is huge. How European workers? The allegation is that we don't want to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's about like bringing in new ideas and reflecting on the fact that the traditional mindset of, a 40 or a 45-year career in the same company, and then you get your nice retirement, that's That's gone for most people.
But in
now.
Asia, you have.
But is it gone, though?
But
It's
you
not
have
gone from the
another
mindset.
value is for age. So in Asia, they value so it's your experience. So they say, well, why he's 35 years on the job. He's so experienced. That has a huge value. And in Europe, we often say, well, he's 35 years on the job. That is quite close to retirement. Yeah. And this is a complete different mentality.
I just want to bring an image to this conversation. I don't know if you had the chance to watch this movie, The Intern. And Robert De Niro is one of the main characters. And it's actually, he's retired. It's a man, a 65-year-old man who's retired. He's bored. He lost his wife, and he wants to keep being useful for the society. And he becomes an intern in a tech company, in an e-commerce company, and he's valued there for his experience, for his knowledge, for his. So I tend to agree with Dennis. This is kind of there will be a necessary change of mindset to address this aging population. People have better living conditions until later in their lives, so we will have to accommodate all this.
And it's also like we need to move away from this mindset, I suppose, most obviously seen in France recently, that like at the age of 60, whatever, you have to retire. Yeah. You know, we need to become more flexible. But there's just one key thing that kind of prohibits, people over the age of 50 from reskilling properly, and that's financial. It's a financial motive because often you've
I've got my mortgage to pay.
Exactly.
I've got the kids going to university.
So we need to be more innovative, and I think it's a situation where businesses can help more.
What is the innovation? How do you do that? You fund them through
there's some interesting ideas coming from Scandinavia that each individual worker, once they pay into the Social Security Fund for a certain amount of years, will have access to a kind of pot of money that's a reskilling fund, and that everybody would have an individual reskilling fund, a little bit like how the state pensions are becoming, with everybody having their own individual accounts. Something like that, I think, is very important. And then for younger workers, I think we have to understand that there's a problem at both sides. There's a problem of overqualification and there's a problem of underqualification. And a key factor is, particularly in Southern Europe, some of the stories that my Italian and my Spanish colleagues tell me about the working conditions for young people who have, all the qualifications, master's degrees, PhDs, you name it, but the starting salaries, are very, very important, and that will have to change.
And
yes,
also,
exactly.
I'm from Portugal, and we have massive problems in relation to the starting salaries. Once a young professional joins the labor market, it's very low, and in addition to that, or because of that, young people tend to leave their parents' house later in the process. We are talking about an average of 34 years old to leave the parents' house.
And this is all sorts of knock-on effects then for...
That is a number.
For their own family formation, for fertility rates, for everything like that. It has a knock-on effect.
For the housing markets and stuff as well. It's really real issue. Yeah. So this is it though. We've talked a bit about reskilling, but let's talk about young people as well. They're entering a world where everything's going to be automated. That's what they're being told. AI is taking over. It's taking my job as a journalist for sure, right? That's what we're being told, or they don't believe it at all. Half of this, if to come to what you said, Dennis, is about mindset change, right? Firstly, if I'm going to work longer and not feel that I need to drop out of the labour market, I'm going to want to love my job, right? I'm going to want to do my job. And I'm not going to be scared, as you said, of being, out or doing low-paid jobs. What is your assessment for young people that are entering the labour market at the minute, Lidia? It doesn't feel like it's a good picture for them, saddled with huge student debts oftentimes.
Well, I don't agree with that because obviously, education systems are crucial in this change that we are witnessing. But what comes with a young age is optimism and is, courage and being able to adapt to the different circumstances. So I do believe that, and
they want digital jobs as well.
They want digital jobs. Yeah. It's quite a fancy thing at the moment. So I think that the main challenge is actually more on the adaptation from the policies of the governments in achieving these objectives, these broader objectives, and in enabling the opportunities for younger people, rather than the possible difficulties or challenges that the young people are going to face. Because the truth is, and we know that there have been so many historical events, wars, and conflicts, and where the young people have been at the forefront in fighting for what they believe and what they. And if we look at Ukraine, the vast majority of the military forces, they are of a young age. So young people drive change. I think we can be optimistic about their capacity to adapt. And I think the main challenge relies on the change of the mindset, not only from the business side, but also from the government authorities.
So Dennis, I want to turn to you. That was a bit of a negative question of me, I agree. Let's talk.
Well, but may I add one sentence to this? I think we needn't be afraid, because every generation has their own challenges.
Yeah.
So my grandfathers, they left Germany in 1943 because they were young men and they had to be soldiers. And they had no freedom of choice. And when they returned from war and from war prison, they came back without any real education. They came back into a destroyed country. And they made their way. So and this was normal for young men in Germany in this time. So every generation has its challenge. And when I look at my children, they are 2 and 5 now, the way how they grew up, how they deal with media, with digital issues. So when we were 2 or 5 years old, the world looked completely different.
Yeah.
No smartphone was around, and they grew up with all that. So I'm not afraid.
No, I think
I'm
that's right.
optimistic.
So
that's why I'm EPP.
That optimism, though, has to come through in the plans that are being put forward, like this skills year. What tangible sort of successes? What are the concrete things that you can envisage if what this plan to try and upskill the labour force in the EU goes ahead? What can we succeed in? What can we see it by 2030?
Well, I made an example what can be done with new ideas with distance learning universities, and I think what is really important is that we have different levels to touch, because we have different levels of skills. So we have good qualified workers who need maybe an add-on in digital skills. But then we have low-skilled workers. It was in my country, it was possible with low skills, with formal low skills, to earn a huge amount of money. If you work in a unionized big factory, in a big plant, even with low skills, you could earn a really good amount of money. This becomes more and more difficult. So these are people we have to take care about for upskilling. And then the European Union came up with new ideas, like the micro-credential learning. So this is especially a need for people with near to zero skills, to give them opportunities to have some add-ons, to have some kind of qualification, because to have a kind of qualification is always better than to have non-qualification. And then, of course, we also have to talk about how to reactivate unemployed people. This is also a very crucial issue. We cannot, in a situation where we run out of staff, where we have a leakage of staff, and we have, on the other hand, millions of unemployed people. But there we need other skills. When you see long-time unemployed, it often starts with things like, please don't laugh, but it starts with things like getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
Getting up in the morning at 6,
matter,
making yourself ready.
Yeah.
So if you haven't done this for 2 or 3 years because it was not necessary to do it, just let go.
Yeah.
You have to come in on this and train it. It's a question of training.
And also, this is the thing, though. This comes back to the mentality shift as well, though. And
that's the add-on, yeah.
What our phones are doing, and like I am working all the time through the night, sending text messages. So, sorting things out. So the way in which we work often is changing massively as well. I mean, I want to talk to you about this. We've touched on this a little bit. The competitive. We talked about countries like India and China, huge countries where the workforce is so much cheaper to pay to do these things. Do you think, in some sense, that this idea of upskilling is going to actually protect us, or are we just going to continue getting the sort of dirty, low-paid jobs done outside of the EU as we have done until now?
Well, no, but the history of society shows that the wealthier society becomes, the jobs become more, highly advanced, highly skilled, and that, migration, obviously usually solves the gap at the low-paid side. But I think what I would hope is that the upskilling debate doesn't just get stuck at tech and the green industries.
Where else should it go?
Well, obviously the care industry.
Like you said with the nurses.
There's 1 million vacancies across Europe at the moment in the care industry, and
but they're not very well paid anymore.
Well, that's what we need. That's the problem.
And working conditions.
Yes, and working
conditions. So
the
shift doesn't necessarily need to be skills. If the jobs are good and well paid, intelligent kids will train to be doctors and work
It's about encouraging people, giving them the skills where they feel confident enough to work in these areas. Because often what you'll find is that the care industry has become quite a gendered. It's become quite a gendered industry in the sense of that it's predominantly female in a lot of these critical roles, and that's not a good thing for society. It's not a good thing for patients. So we need to challenge all this.
Does offering schemes to skill up workers change that, or does changing the culture within the businesses not change that?
Oh, it's a combination of both. Absolutely. I think companies and industries have to invest a lot more in their staff. They have to invest a lot more in training. But I'll give you one practical example of what can happen. And Jack, this might be of interest to you. Lucy Kellaway, the well-known Financial Times columnist for I think 20 or 30 years, retrained as a teacher in her 50s.
That's classic journalist to teacher job.
Yes, but more than that is that she set up an NGO to help high-achieving people coming from the finance, banking sectors to retrain as teachers. And she's managed to successfully, integrate several hundred of these highly qualified, highly experienced people back into mostly underprivileged communities. So when we talk about upskilling, we need to talk about these big societal issues.
Yeah, this is it. It can feel a little bit like, even our conversation, we can feel like we're sort of speaking from the outside, but unless it is seen across the whole of it, it doesn't shape the discussion.
Yes, exactly.
And this is it, Lidia, just a quick point to you to sort of start wrapping up. It's about engagement. We can talk as much as we want about this in Brussels, even in the member states, in the governments. Unless populations engage, it doesn't work. So what is the crucial thing in your mind to get that engagement?
Well, I could give you the example of climate change and the European climate law. I mean, it all came from, it's a grassroots movement, and the European Union delivered on that. And our main messages here have been, or the EPP messages here have been, that economy and environment are not incompatible. Quite the opposite. They go hand in hand. And so if we want to achieve something in the environmental side, in caring for the environment, in caring for future generations, we have to involve all stakeholders of our society. And this includes businesses, this includes private, public sector, this involves NGOs and so on, universities, academia, knowledge, science. So this is all important. And the moment that we acknowledge as well that these changes that we are going through, that the conversation about skills, it's more a societal conversation rather than just a specific technological need or green need, then we will be in a position to actually convoke everyone to be part and to be a driver of this change. So I think there's a huge responsibility, I would say, from the politicians' side, from the prime ministers, from the governments in general, because they are the ones in most of times setting the tone in their public opinions. So if we see that engagement or a start of that engagement coming from the governments as a first place, I think the whole society will better understand that if we want to succeed, if we want to keep growing our economies, if we want to keep, delivering for people and increasing salaries and so on, we need this conversation. And this is absolutely crucial for the survival or for the affirmation of the European Union in the rest of the world.
Dennis, this is it. We've got a few more months left on this European Year of Skills. What happens after 2023 is over?
Well, I think when 2023 is over and we are running for the elections next year, this is an important step to look back and to check, are we on track with our 2030 targets for skills, or is there still improvement needed or some changes needed? And I think this will then be also an important issue for the upcoming Commission. And I think for me as member of the Parliament, so in case I'm re-elected next year, this is important to hear from when Ursula von der Leyen is interested in being re-elected. I want to hear from her in her very first speech then in Strasbourg, when she's asking for the support of the members of the Parliament, some ideas on improvement of this. This is in my eyes an absolutely key issue. So.
But Jack, if I can, just very briefly, I honestly think that we also have to have a conversation about the discrepancies on skills between member states.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not suggesting that the European Union or the European Commission has to interfere in the educational systems because they are of a national competence. But at the same time, this is a problem that somehow undermines the capacity of the Union to affirm itself in a more global context.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about France and Germany and their industries, and don't just want low-paid jobs in the poorer member states. It's just not going to work.
But Lidia is right. Yeah,
I think this year of skills might end up being a decade of skills if we're going to get it right. It has to be a long-term project, right? Dennis Radtke, thank you so much for being with me here in the Parliament. Lidia Pereira and Eoin Drea as well. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to everyone that's been listening to the podcast. What do you think about this? Head to the EPP Group on social media and join the discussion there. Thanks so much.